Hey guys, I'm Nick at NickDermer20.
My name is Corey Snipes at SnipesDama.
You guys are listening to Georgia Kendama Radio. Today we got a really interesting interview for you guys. We're going to be talking to Jeremy about the history of Kendama USA. If you don't know who Jeremy is, just find out. So the first question is, as far as the history of Kendama United States, it's a very long history that a lot of people don't know correctly, and I feel like people kind of just assume things. Mm-hmm. So from your stance, how did Kendama USA start? Like, where did it come from? As far as I know, there's a bunch of people that came from Japan. I think there were skiers or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then they brought it over, and then they just started playing California. But that's about basically the extent of what I know. So as far as you know, because you're the most original person I can think of, how did it start in the United States?
Yeah, so I think some of the main origin stories, there's, if you go the ski route, like JP Auclair, and there was a big snowboard video or a big ski video that inspired a lot of people. That's a place a lot of people saw for the first time.
Yeah.
And also Colin Sander had gotten into it, and they put up an edit from their ski shop. And
so he was one of the okay.
So some of those roots kind of existed before I ever even learned about kendama, and so while some people kind of knew about it and played, it was really hard to get any information about kendama or to learn about it, or if you typed kendama into Google, you'd find nothing. Wow. So
because it was all probably in Japanese anyways.
So you could actually, for a while, if you could take like the characters, the kanji, you could Google search the kanji, and then you'd get some Japanese websites. But then unless you have someone to help translate.
And Google Translate didn't work at that point because it was
it existed, but not like it exists now. It was a lot.
No, it was instant and good.
Right.
And so around what year period was that?
Honestly, I don't know the year that video with JP came out. The first time that I ever learned about kendama was 2006. Okay. And so I'm pretty sure his videos had come out prior to that, but I don't know the exact year.
So how did you link up with Colin Sanders? How did that all play out? I want to know about that. I've never heard about that.
Yeah, where did you come into the picture as far as kendama? How did you get into it and all?
Yeah, so I had originally found out about kendama in Japan on a trip there, and after bringing it from Japan here to the U.S., it would be this thing that I would always travel with. People would always ask me about it. And we'd always try to find kendamas here in the U.S., and we couldn't find any. That's a whole story in itself. But eventually decided to start Kendama USA and start bringing in some kendamas from Japan. And at that point, when we were going to launch Kendama USA, we kind of developed a team. And like I was saying at the time, there's really no one else playing kendama. And so we'd search, and we could never find anywhere to get kendamas or any other kendama players,
especially over here.
Yeah, and then eventually one day I would search, every few months, and eventually one day I looked up kendama, and this one YouTube video popped up, and it was Colin's edit one in the ski shop, and we're like, oh wow, someone else here in the U.S. is doing this. No way. Yeah. And so at the time, it was literally the only other people that were playing kendama. And so we're starting this kendama team. And it's, again, the perspective back then is so much different than it is now. But the concept of having a kendama team, it was, it was borderline a joke.
Yeah.
It was just all for fun. It was kind of for kicks. It was nowhere near as serious of a level as it is now.
Yeah.
And so at the time, we thought, oh man, it'd be really funny to get this other person on our kendama team, but thought, oh man, this is going to be really awkward, and just really completely just cold messaging a stranger through the internet about this Japanese toy. It just seemed absurd at the time.
And this was you talking, messaging Sanders, or
I was trying to decide the best way to message him, and so I started looking at his other videos and trying to find, learn more about him and see if there's any common ground. Right. How can I approach this? And so there's some different ski videos, and it looked like he was into some video stuff. And then there's this one video, and it was topsoil on a kink rail or something. I was like, oh, this guy skates. Okay, no problem. There's a perfect in. I hadn't been involved in that world for years and years and years, and so I messaged him from that. and that kind of gave us a common ground to kick things off and start talking about kendama. And then he was the first person that we ever. Technically, he wasn't the first ever kendama team member for Kendama USA, but he was the first like serious kendama player that we ever put on Kendama USA.
So a lot of people tell me like inline skating has a big influence in too.
Yeah.
And I know obviously you have a huge background in inline skating. I know Matt Rice did, and he had his own huge influence in it back in the day too. What was the deal with inline skating kendama? Because I feel like besides with skiing, that was also a big influence for it. Did it bring in a lot of people, or what was the whole deal with that?
So that was kind of the origin that allowed me to even find out about kendama in the first place. So when we were in Japan, we were there for a rollerblading tour, and we were out there shooting this article, and our friends that we were staying with in between skate spots one day, we're on the bus. And my friend is Chaki and Baba, and he pulls this thing out of his bag, and they start playing it, and we're like, oh my gosh. And I'd actually recognized it way back in the day. There was an inline video, the Solomon video, and there was a really quick clip of, I think it might have been Chaki playing kendama, but it was really quick, but it always kind of stuck in my head as this like, distant Japanese, relic or something like that. And so seeing it in person, we're like, oh, that's that thing. And so they started playing, and it was like, oh, this is actually really interesting. Can we try it? And so immediately, it's almost like everyone else who gets into kendama, you pick it up, you kind of get hooked on it. And
the original kendama story for every person.
Exactly.
Just like you pick it up, this is cool, and it's just like addictive from there.
Absolutely. So that trip, we're like, okay, we gotta get one of these. And so I don't remember if it was that night or the next day, but we made it a point really quick to go pick up kendamas. So we went to this store. It's called Tokyo Hands. It's a big chain store in Japan, and went in there, got a red TK16.
Oh, nice.
And so even though, it was a skate trip, and we were like shooting and skating, and obviously that was the primary focus, but kendama just kind of automatically became the secondary focus. So we're waiting on trains, waiting on buses, in between stops, waiting to get food. We would be learning how to play this game.
Yeah.
And again, like we had zero knowledge of the history, zero knowledge of anything else. It was just the game. So like we thought, well, what if you throw the ball and you spin it at 360 and catch it again? We're like, wow, we just invented a trick.
Yeah.
And literally had, no knowledge that
something existed.
Yeah,
the
decades and
GKR already
decades of history.
decided that was a trick and everything.
Exactly.
Probably part of what made it so fun is you were all on such an equal skill level. You were just all stoked on just
absolutely
being creative with it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's one of the cool things about like the old days of kendama is that you were making the tricks. Other than what the JKA had probably made at that point, like a lot of the stuff today didn't exist back then, especially.
Yeah, today it's like more combos coming out of nowhere.
At this point, it's like it's hard to make a trick. Yeah, like it's more like you doing this weird combo that no one thought of.
And when it does happen, it is a huge deal.
Yeah,
because it's unfound territory usually.
Yeah.
So, what made you decide that Kendama USA needed to have? I know you said that like you decided you kind of jumped to like making the company, but what made you think, okay, no one else has a company here?
Sure. So there's actually a pretty big time gap between when I first learned about it and got interested in it and when anything with Kendama USA started. So pretty much from our perspective, we got this game but we were there for a skate trip and we came back and just kept on doing our thing.
Yeah.
But I would just notice that when I got back home, I would bring it out. And every time I would bring it out, somebody would ask me, they'd say, hey, what is that? And I would show them, and they would ask me if they could try it, and they would enjoy it. And then immediately after they enjoy it, they asked me, where can I get one? And the only answer was, it's
Japan.
You can only get it from Japan. And so then we'd go somewhere else, and someone would ask me the same question. And I was traveling a lot for doing photo work, and so even other countries, everywhere I'd go, people would ask the exact same thing, or I'd be at a hostel somewhere in South America. And even if we can't communicate through the language, you get almost sign language.
Yeah, you still kind of understand.
Pointing, what is that? And and it almost became this tool that it was just very universal, and so just saw that pattern happening again and again and again, and started researching and looking for any place in the U.S. to get it, and there's just nowhere to get it. And enough of our close friends really, really wanted to get one. And so at first, it wasn't a business or anything. I just called my friend Shinpei back in Japan. Or I didn't call. what did we do at that time? It was probably through email or something, and it got a hold of him and said, hey, could you go back to that store and get us some more? And could I buy those from you? And we'll give them to our friends here. And so we did that. And then when all their friends saw it, they started basically, hey, where did you get that? I got it from this guy, Jeremy.
Like, well, yeah.
And hey, can I get one? And we're like, oh no, let's see if we can get some more. So got in touch with them. And then, so it was a really organic process. And eventually so many people started asking. It was like, man, maybe we should, start something really small. And so at that point, I said, hey, is there any factory there? Is there any kind of connection that we could, to be able to buy more and actually resell them? And so Shinpei looked around for us and found this factory and said, okay, here's what it is, and send it over. And so at the time, I'm pretty sure it was 100 kendamas, and I was really, really nervous, extremely nervous. It was like, I know people like it, but this is like all the money I have.
Because at this point, you had just been giving it to the people like you knew, like really organically, and like just your friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was all just word of mouth.
It's kind of just like this is the first step to being like, okay, now I actually have capital in this, and it could go wrong if I don't do something with it.
Yeah, it was risky. It was like, what am I going to do with 100 kendamas? Like I know a few people want it, but but I don't know. It felt right, and decided to take the leap, and so I don't even know how much time passed. I mean, it seemed like a pretty long time. It's probably like weeks or months. And then one day these boxes show up and it's just all in Japanese. And we're like, oh, this must be the kendama thing. And found out later they just put a whole bunch of Mugans inside of a Japanese toilet paper box and shipped it out. And it's crazy because that was the first real batch we ever got. And it was this 100 OG Mugans. And at the time, there was no such thing as an OG Mugen.
It was like, this is a kendama.
It was literally just a kendama. And so we would, and it started to make a little blog. We made a video, and it's just really, really simple, really bare bones.
And was that here in Georgia, or was that in California? Where was that?
I was actually living in Lawrence, Kansas at the time.
Wow.
Places. Did not know.
I never heard of anything coming out of Kansas as far as kendama, honestly.
Yeah.
Sorry for anyone that plays kendama in Kansas, but I didn't know that. That's
Yeah, so it's, real random. It's out there in this little room. It was actually on the writer William S. Burroughs.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a stint in his life that he was like living out there. So there's a compound of like 3 or 4 houses that was on his estate, and so our landlord like runs his whole estate. And so we're actually starting like one of William S. Burroughs' properties, I guess. Yeah.
So, wow. I mean, so this all happened, and you get to the point where you got this 100 kendamas, and so what happened then? Like, what you had 100 kendamas, and
did it
you sell them like
sure. So
day one they're all gone, or like
so back to the more rollerblading ties. There was a big contest coming up called Winter Clash, and it's in Germany every year. It's a really, really awesome contest, and the magazine I was working for at the time, B-Mag, they had a booth there, and I said, hey, a lot of people have been asking about this. Do you care if I bring some of those to the booth? And at the same time, we were like filming a video and everything, and so honestly, I have to think which was first, like the video or Winter Clash. I think Winter Clash might have been first, but when we were starting the team, basically the first team, it was all these pros who were like the best of the best of the best pros. And again, it was at that time there's no other basis for kendama, and it was just something that everyone liked. And so when we made our first team, it was almost, I mean, in some senses, just a joke. It was like, hey, like what do we have? It'd be like getting, I don't know, like all the best like NBA stars to have like a pro paddleball team or something like that. And so we did that. We made a video, and so anyway, so at this contest, apparently a lot of people, I think, had either seen that or word of mouth had spread. And so as soon as we like put them out the booth, people were like, oh, that's that thing, and so we moved a lot of them at that first contest. And then I think from between that and between that other video, a lot of the first players were people who, either skated or they were friends of skaters.
Yeah.
And so many people that kind of got that first batch of 100
Yeah.
were a lot of like the first Kendama players in the U.S. And so that whole scene kind of developed first, I think, or early, and then kept spreading out from there. So
yeah, and that probably
but I
also
think that's why
helped
so
the
many of the
Germany and
roots
the
that always-
European, like that probably, because you were in Germany, you said when it was, so that probably also helped like the European scene, because I'm sure Kendama wasn't like that big of a deal in Europe at the time either.
I think so, and again, I know that there's some other players in Europe who, either through trips to Japan or maybe through JP's video or some other sources, again, there was definitely not a Kendama scene, but there was definitely a few Kendama players. I know like Nick Schofer was one who's like he skated too, and I think he had found out about it like on a previous trip to Japan, even way before we found it. So, so we definitely like I definitely wasn't the first person who ever saw Kendama in Japan, or the first person to ever bring it back or anything like that. But we kind of started, taking the first steps towards like really trying to share it, or I guess you call it marketing it.
Yeah. So going from there, you went to Germany and you brought all these people Kendamas, and they're so stoked on it, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. All the people like it. Is that the point where you said, you know what, maybe I have something here, maybe we have something here, and you kind of is this when you kind of like the wheels were moving in your head saying, maybe we can just start a full company and start doing that?
Sort of. It wasn't that quick. Because I don't even think we took all 100. I don't remember how many we took to that contest, but it sold faster than I thought. And then I think when we first put up it was like a little free e-commerce site, and so at the time, I mean, it was just kind of like, oh, maybe there's this little thing on the side. It was never like huge ambitions or anything like that. And so, but after that first batch, we ended up selling that first batch and then reached back out to see if we could get more. And so we kind of just flipped batches, a few different times. And so after doing that a few times, it started, you could kind of see this organic growth. And so it wasn't like one particular day where it was like, oh, wow, this is the grand plan for the future. My mind was already blown. Like, oh my gosh, like we
sold a couple of these.
Yeah.
Like people are actually
we moved through the first batch. Like that was like mind blowing to me at the time. So after the second batch or third batch, every step of the way was like, oh my gosh, this is bigger than I expected it to be. This is bigger than I expected it to be. But again, I was doing so much photo work at the time, and was traveling all over the place, and so this is always just something that was on the side. So in my mind at the time, I was like gung ho about photography. I was gonna trying to like rise up the ranks or whatever to really focus on that craft, and Kendama was always was part of it, but it was on the side. And so there's definitely a while, a few years into that as Kendama was like organically growing, I started to kind of realize, wow, okay, this is definitely like trending up, and it's it's taking more time, and started to like see potential other opportunities with it. But I was so in love with what I was doing through photo at the same time. I had a hard time completely like flipping the switch and quitting to do the photo work. So eventually it was the end of 2010 actually is when, and we had been, Kendama USA had been up, and we had already had I think at the time Colin was still like the only main like Kendama player who was on the team, but eventually like we just saw enough interest in Kendama, and it was right when like the whole world was turning digital, at least on the photo side. So all these like magazines were drying up, and all the print publications that were getting pushed out by digital and online platforms. Exactly. So all the work was drying up, and at that time I was actually I'd moved from Kansas to New York, and so like it was like winter time was coming in and work was drying up, and it just, everything at the time just felt like if the photo side was on the decline and Kendama was on the on the
this is what I need to do to keep surviving anyways, and plus all these people want it.
Exactly.
So really, for you, it sounds like Kendama USA kind of grew out of necessity. Just your friends needing it. Not as in like
Sure.
you needed the money, but I mean like your friends needing it, and then more people needing it, and like you were the only person around that sold them anyway, so you just needed to keep getting more so the people that wanted it could have it.
Yeah, it was just like there's more and more interest in kendama, and there
Yeah.
just wasn't many places to find it.
Yeah.
So at the time, it was really just it's like that one website, and that was pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where did the name Kendama USA was that like the first name that popped in your head,
It's
or
like,
some
yeah,
other
it was
names, or-
USA,
Pretty much, it was
yeah.
really simple. It was it was like, well, there's not kendamas in the USA,
USA.
and let's bring
Kendama
some
USA.
here and just kendama. I mean, again, it wasn't so much at that time. Perspective so much different back then, but we're just like, I don't know, let's try this thing, and
Yeah.
that was pretty much it. So it wasn't long meetings and brainstorming
Yeah.
like strategies of names. It was
Yeah.
like, no, we're like, I don't know, we're in the USA, Kendama USA.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, especially for being like the first major kendama company in the United States. Like, this is a game comes from another place. We're bringing it over here. It's the United States, whatever.
Yep.
So another thing that kind of just came out of necessity, more or less, was the name Kendama USA. There you go. Why? So I know Smyrna was there for a long time. Why did everything come over to Georgia?
Yeah, so I grew up here. So
Okay.
So I was born in Canada. I moved here really young, like when I was 1 or 2 or something like that, and stayed here through college before I left for Kansas. So roots were here, friends were here, family's here, and so when I left New York, I'd been away for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years, and I would see my family like on vacations or holidays, but honestly just kind of like missed them too, and I was like, I want to start this whole new thing, so I just moved back in with my parents. So moved in with them, got to spend some time with them, start focusing on the kendama thing,
And you just kind of moved Kendama USA with you because that's just where you wanted to be.
oh yeah, I mean kendama USA was just like a laptop and a box of kendama.
So it was pretty easy to move anyways at that point.
Yeah, and it's kind of like wherever I would go. So sometimes like it would just be in like these different apartments as I moved around, or if I was traveling, like sometimes I would just literally like bring one bag that would have kendamas, and I would ship orders from on the road. Like I'd wake up early and like print out packing slips and like go to the post office before we'd go out and shoot photos, or like whoever I was like living with at the time, like roommates would help out, and I'd say, hey, can we, I'll send you these addresses, and if you can just, I'll tell you the color. At the time, it was really simple. It was like either put the red one or the blue one or the green one. We only, there's like one kind of package it would go into. We knew exactly what postage would be, and we'd handwrite every label, and so the process was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, even coming from different places, it's so like boom.
Yeah, so moving Kendama USA was just a matter of like picking up a box and a laptop, and, like coming back to Atlanta.
It makes it easy for sure. You wanna?
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you right around 2010 was when everything started picking up for you, but we found out about kendama in around 2011. Would you say 2010 or 2011 was bigger for kendama?
So, really, for all those years, I think probably up until like 2015, every year just kind of grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, I guess 2011 would have been bigger than 2010, which was bigger than 2009, and so forth. And so, but 2011 was basically the first year we ever made our own kendama. So, one of the big things at the time, like throughout 2000, I don't know, probably 9 and 10, is we started having just other ideas and like things that we'd want to try out and change. And so we'd reach out to, at that time, we'd started already bringing in like Ozoras and TKs. Mugen had already stopped production. I think even after like our first batch or two, like Mugen, it was like right at the time that
they stopped
Mugen,
in like
closed their shop.
6 or 8, something like that, right?
I don't even know the year off the top of my head, but that first
pretty
batch,
early, obviously.
that's what like made that first batch of Mugen so
special.
Is like we got that, and then like that was it. And so we would reach out and be like, hey, we've got some other ideas, and they weren't like these like groundbreaking, revolutionary ideas, but it would be like, here's some other colors, or we want to do some stripes, we want to do like some really, really simple changes. And all the Japanese companies that we're working with, they'd just be like, nope, like we make It was very traditional, like we make red, we make black, we make green,
Yeah.
there's like select colors, simple system, that's what we make, take it or leave it.
Wow.
And so eventually had been like just doing some research and saying, okay, if we can't do it through them, can we do this on our own? And we had even been like, custom painting, some TKs that would come in, or had this like just really, really ghetto like little paint workshop in this garage in Kansas, and trying like different dyes and all sorts of stuff. Like talked to Colin Sander, asked him about like our first like dyed kendama.
Jeez.
But
So what was the process like trying to get your first kendama made? Like getting the shape set out and everything like that. And you mentioned paints. Was paint at all like in the back of your mind, like as far as playability goes, or was it just like trying to get it set? And
sure, yeah, it was the very first like process of getting our kendamas made was like one of the most insane experiences of my life, for sure. And it's great, again, like thinking back how it is now, like things have changed so much in such a short amount of time.
right.
But if you go back to that point, there's no factories making kendamas outside of the Japanese
the
companies
JKA
and like
global
most of
ones,
the JKA, and we had already talked to them, and
They're like,
they wouldn't do anything for us. So it's kind of starting from scratch, and so I had looked all over the U.S. and talked to different woodworkers and different factories, and really quickly realized, there's not that many woodworking factories in the U.S. There are definitely different pockets, like some in like Virginia and North Carolina, a few parts of the states that did have some, and they would mostly be like furniture makers and things like that. And brought them to kendama, and pretty much just got shut down or rejected from every single place. That it was just it was either just way too small of a project, like they needed thousands and thousands of units, and we're like, it's not going to happen. And then a few places, there was only 2 or 3 people who actually like took the time to really even consider it or price it out. And the people who did price it out, it would be like, I don't even remember, but it was way up there. It'd be like, I don't know, maybe like $30 to $50 for like per kendama before paint or packaging or anything. And so there's just no way we'd ever be able to like buy those and resell them.
Especially because at this time, like TKs and Ozoros, they're still only like $16, $25 somewhere in there. So to have $40 kendamas for people that don't, because at that point I assumed there wasn't really a premium.
No, there was
kendama. People weren't looking for premium kendamas. It was like, what's this toy?
Yeah, it was.
So
it
to
was
have that
super
expensive
simple
toy,
at the time. Yeah. So all the different considerations and like weight and lunar balance, and things like that. I mean, it was.
We just need kendamas. Come on.
This was such an early stage before even the play style in the U.S. like evolved to that level. Because at this point, the trick vocabulary was still pretty simple. Yeah. So so after kind of getting rejected in the U.S., I was just doing more research, and then there must be a reason that everything's made overseas, and you always see made in China. So started researching factories there, and essentially just got a huge database of factories. Wrote up a couple emails, like sent it out to maybe like 100 different factories, and I put different criteria in for like who we'd want to work with to see like how quick would they get back to us. Do they even speak English? And a couple different things like that. So we'd like whittle down who would work with us and not work with us. And we actually, when I was still in New York, we made a CAD prototype. So I had a friend who went to school at Pratt, and went into Photoshop, and like we made this like fake IDs for Pratt, so we could get into their like labs there, because he like just graduated, and then so we basically like snuck into the Pratt labs, and then use their like 3D software to like make this mock-up of like the first kendama. And then so the factories that we decided to work with, we sent them that shape, and then had them start like making prototypes and stuff like that for us. So so there was a handful that would have prototypes, and then based on that, we like whittle it down further and further, like which ones are absolute garbage, which
Yeah.
ones are decent.
Yeah.
And then from there, got into like pricing and stuff like that. And eventually, none of them really where I wanted it to be. And so, but I think it was either like 2, maybe 3 factories that seemed like they had the most potential. But again, this was like, I was really nervous to even like try to get anything done in China. And then you hear, like at the time, you just hear all these like horror stories about China and, child labor stories. And so I was really hesitant to even do it because I was like, I don't want to, be involved in all this, and I don't want to have some sweatshop turning out.
Yeah, plus that's around the time when people in the U.S. were like kind of saying, we were kind of trying to shift away from the made in China thing. Because like from 2000 on, or really like the 90s on, like everything started getting made in China, and that's around the time we're like, oh, we want stuff made in the U.S. So I can totally understand that reasoning. Like, this is a little sketch, but it's kind of what we have to do.
Yeah, and so I was like, but if that's the only option to get it made, I want to at least go like see it for myself. I want to see who's making it. I want to be sure the factory's not some crazy child sweatshop or anything like
exactly.
that. And literally like to do our first production, it was like every dollar I'd ever earned. We'd just been like flipping the kendamas that we had been selling. And at the time it was like, so like all the money between photo and between kendama, it was like making this all in bet to make one production because minimums were super high. And so it was kind of like this all in bet. So I'm like, I can't invest like everything that I've ever like worked for, these last
in
few
something
years.
You're not sure.
Every penny I've ever saved up and just like send it to China.
Exactly.
And
that's a big decision.
And so ended up going over there, and at the time they were like, oh, it should be about a 2-week trip to finalize everything and finish samples and production. And I was absolutely clueless at that time. So I was like, oh, it's cool. 2 weeks sounds great. And went over there. And it took like almost a week or two. It's crazy. I mean, then like we like had like drawn up a contract and this whole thing. And would never do things now the way I did it then.
Yeah.
But we started and started production, and then really quickly realized that the quality of our original sample was a lot different than the quality that was coming out of the factory. And so and my trip was about to end, and I was like, man, like I can't leave. Like I'm not comfortable with where the quality is. So I'm gonna like extend my ticket. So I extended my ticket for like a few more weeks, and the whole production process was just like really intense because there was no factories. Like now there's factories who specialize in kendama. At the time, these were just woodworking factories, and so all the tools and molds, everything was from scratch. None of the workers had experience with the product. What my vision of what would make a good product and their vision was completely different. Spike links were all over the place, and so I was literally like waking up in the morning, like riding a bike that some lady at the hotel let me borrow, and going to these different workshops and like overseeing parts of the production and like picking out pieces that were bad and trying to like have these meetings with the factory owner to to get stuff fixed because we'd already put it into pods. I was pretty much like stuck. I was like, this has to
this needs to happen or nothing. It has to
and so those few weeks went by. I had to like end up extending my ticket again. So I ended up like staying. That trip was like 3 or 4 months, I think.
Oh, jeez.
And
they'd probably extend your visa at that point too,
well,
right?
yeah, I was supposed to. That was a whole other piece. Yeah, so I thought I had a visa that was longer. I thought it was like, I think it was only a 60-day, and I thought I had a 90-day.
Oh.
And so partway through the process, when I went back to the hotel one morning or one day after the factory, they were like, hey, like the police were here earlier.
Oh, no.
We can't have you at the hotel. Apparently you've overstayed your visa. But they're probably not going to be back for a while, so you should probably get your stuff and leave, it's the regulations there are like really tight. Like you always have to check in, your passport at every hotel.
Even today,
Yeah, they keep really, really tight control over like where everyone is and what everyone's doing in China. It's a kind of a different world over there.
Yeah.
So so I ended up got all my stuff, and pretty much for the last little bit of the factory production had to like live in this other pretty much like shared a home with one of the factory workers.
Okay.
And had to kind of just like live off the grid a little bit.
Yeah.
And just hope, I was like, okay, as long as I don't get caught here in the next few weeks before the end of production, everything should work out fine. And then traveling back from there back to Shanghai was like this whole other mission because I had to take they had to like smuggle me on these like super late night buses and like stay with relatives of factory members along the way. Because
and could you not go to an embassy and be like, can I just extend my stay?
Well, so the whole thing was if I get to Shanghai, I could get it fixed at the embassy easy. But I was like way deep out, like in the mountains, like super deep. And so they were saying like, yeah, if you try to, like if you get picked up by the police here, they just don't even have the infrastructure to do any of that. And so by default, they have to hold you, and it could take, however many days or a week. So to avoid trying to be arrested and
and in the middle of you trying to do something that you had put a deposit in, it's like, I don't have time to deal with being arrested.
yeah, exactly. So I was like, if I can just get to Shanghai, I can figure it out there. But everyone I was with, they're like, yeah, you don't want to get stuck with the authorities here because you're not gonna. Nothing's gonna happen. I wasn't gonna get like sent to some like labor camp or anything crazy. But it just would have been. It would have been a hassle.
Yeah.
So that seemed like it was a huge hassle, but flashing forward to today, is it any different from the first time? Is it a lot easier?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like an insane, like night and day difference of, I mean, now we have like so much customization. People who have worked on our specific products who, we have a lot of stuff that's like proprietary for us that a lot of people, like I'll see stuff online and people be like, oh, we just get it from the same factory you guys get it from, and it's not really the case.
Yeah, it's not the same thing because...
And so, but there's a lot of other factors, a lot of like clones and fakes and stuff like that. But we have a lot of people who are like specialized to just focus on like our products and have like a different QC standard and things like that. So it's a huge difference now for sure. But also at the time, like it was a relatively simple production. We're only making one shape, and now it's like we have different shapes, different packages, different paints, different and the level of like detail and attention is far different now than it ever was then.
So do you still have to make trips to China, or is it pretty much all at the point where you can have a good conference call with whoever you produce with?
Well, the way technology's gone, it's made things immensely easier. So
that's true.
Just even being able to video chat or
Skype.
Can run certain samples, take photos, and actually trust that if we tried to do it 10 years ago, like you couldn't really trust the quality of the photo, or like what do you do? Like you just have to scan something. And
plus, the relationship with them was totally different too. Because this point, you've had such a long relationship, with whoever you're doing, and you're like, you can assume that if they send you a photo, it's what they're actually going to be sending to you.
Yeah, so now, so everyone we're working with now, it's tight knit, it's good, and it took a lot of years to get to that point. So the first few years, that first factory we worked with, even though we had to kind of like struggle through that first production, we immediately changed to another factory, and so for those first few years, I could go out like once or twice a year for sure, just to be sure. Yeah, things are being done right, and from my whole first experience, like realizing how much can go wrong, it just made me that much more paranoid. And like for me, like if I'm gonna put it out or I'm gonna have like my name on it or something that I'm gonna put out there, like it's important to me that it's done right. So it took a lot more time and effort all those years, but once we got a lot of things established, knew who we could trust, have the right relationships, then from that point you could do a lot more through email and photo and video now than you could then. But still, it's still important to go and check. And I mean, I was there, I don't know, 2 months ago. So still happens, but it's not as needed as it might have been when we first started.
Right. So back then, out of curiosity, I mean, we had JKs and Zoros and TKs, and that's other than the Mugen, the first batch.
Yep.
Why go through all the struggle to do your own kendama when there's good kendamas out there? Did you and whoever you're working with just feel like at the time, like you really think that you can make something that is not better, but like good in its own way? Or was it just because, or what like kind of was the idea behind having Kendama USA's shape and everything like that?
Well, a lot of it was based, it was wanted to just do different things. So a lot of it was like paint and different color styles and things like that. we at the time we thought like the idea of like a tributized kendama would be a really good thing at the time when we were only selling JKs and that was the only thing on the market. One of the main customer service questions we'd always like deal with is that some kid would buy one and he would drop it and the serratos would come off and the parents would say, oh, it's broken. And we talked to them about how it's not actually broken. This is just how you restring it.
Yeah.
And they would and a lot of people were like, no, this is, you sold us something bad.
Oh, okay.
A whole different mentality. There wasn't as much like information and general knowledge about kendama as there is now. And so that's something we dealt with so much that one of the things that we thought about was like, hey, how can we fix this? And so, okay, maybe if we can get the cups, permanently attached to it. So that was that was part of it too. So one was like paint styles, and then also, can we actually just make the kendama better? And again, like the play styles like hadn't evolved that much.
Yeah.
Or like looking back now, it's like such a silly thought. But those were some of the main things going into that first production.
So which
and also I guess the other thing would be like time too. So if we tried to order from some of the Japanese, it just took a while. So it wasn't like they could just ship it. A lot of times, like we would send them something and we might not see a box for 3 or 4 months. And so if we sold out of something, then we were like, we just don't have any kendamas for a while. And so so just being able to have like a steady supply is another big part of it.
So which kendama came first? I know that in 2011 you had 2 different kendamas or brands of kendama come out. You had the Pro models, and then you had the Premier line. Were those both in the mix at the same time, or?
Yeah. So that was, and actually kind of going back to your question before, that was the other thing. We're like, hey, if we're going to have this like new team, let's make Pro mods, and
make it their own.
Again, that was something like we couldn't do through any of the Japanese companies. So the Premier line and the Pro models were they were put out at the exact same time, so it was all part of that whole first production. And the only difference is, they were pretty much the exact same shape, exact same process, except the Pro mods had like a cherry tama and the autographs and different artwork on that. But even the Pro models back then were a much simpler concept than the Pro models are today.
How did you guys like all unanimously decide that you wanted to have a signature on there? And was that like just, hey, let's just throw them on there and let's call it a day? Or like, how did that work out?
Yeah, I mean, we all talked about it, and I mean, again, at the time, like nothing like that had really existed. So just like the concept of like putting a signature on a model or to have a personalized model was like it had never existed before that point. So. So like now, like we have to even like think, how do we push the envelope further and get crazier and crazier with it? But for them, that was like the crazy next step. So, but yeah, we talked about it, and then we did like different silhouettes for each person, and had some general mock-ups. But even then, like I think we talked probably to Colin the most about it. But even for like Turner and Yord, like the first time I ever met Turner was like in Pittsburgh to film the Pro Mod edit, and like show him his Pro model for the first time because we never like had other photos to share or mock-ups or anything like that. Wow. So it's kind of like, hey, this is your Pro model.
That's awesome.
Hope you like it.
Yeah, but I mean, so we had talked about colors and things like that, but as far as like being really involved in the process or doing different rounds of like prototyping and testing and things like that, at that stage, none of that existed.
Mm-hmm. So we went all the way from over 10 years ago to today. Not necessarily kendamas itself, but how do you feel like fast forward from then to today, like kendama itself has changed? Not necessarily like the kendama, but like the atmosphere, the community, the business. Like, how do you feel in simple terms? Is like the actual kendama like vibe has changed since then?
Yeah, I mean it's on a whole different planet now than it ever was then. I think when it first started, a lot of people had really common interest, and a lot of people, even the trick vocabulary was simple, so there wasn't lots of really unique play styles, and I think really around that time, like around 2011-ish, I mean some people maybe before, but for the most part, it was kind of just like a skill. It was only a skill thing. Like, here, let's try to learn this new trick or this new skill, and then it was like, wait a minute, like, who's this guy Turner who's like actually has his own flavor to it, you know? Or like, wow, like Dave Mateo, like, we all do tricks, but no one's doing a trick like Dave Mateo. So like really like seeing this like different style incorporated into it, that kind of like was one tangent that like spun off, and so since then I feel like there's been so many different tangents as like styles have progressed, as the options for kendama have progressed, like the actual just, you know, production and different like technical aspects of like what a kendama is. And so there's trick styles, and then just actual some people who are just so technically oriented, who like are just absolutely pushing what's possible to do with a kendama, you know. And so there's almost like there's this root of, you know, kendama and this kind of like common origin, but then it's like splintered off into so many different, like almost like mini little subcultures within kendama, and never expected things to evolve to that point.
Do you think like it coming over the United States had like a big influence in that? Because I assume like the way it was in Japan, it was always doing the dons, getting the simple tricks like we were talking about down. But as far as I know, you know, like a lot of the United States players did a lot of the creative things. So do you think that the bringing of kendama in the United States pushed kendama in a whole new way for like the community in a whole?
Yeah, I think so, and a lot of it probably had to do with a lot of the media too. And again, kind of going back to like having skate stuff as its culture. When we first started making videos, we're like, that's really the only way we knew to make videos. Like that was. I had gone to school for video production and then learned photography. Like Colin was into video, you know, Jake was like working at Adobe and super into video. And so like we all had these like common like styles of what we think they should look like, or like what we enjoy in a video. And so between like the way it's shot and the music you use and, you know, landing stuff on beat and and kind of like really capturing that style more than just a camera on a tripod with someone in a dojo doing a hard trick. And so I think like as kendama started to grow and that was the first video people would see, then naturally people would like imitate that style too. And so and not necessarily just imitate it, but at least like take that into consideration. So if they're going to do a trick, you know, how do they want to film it, or what kind of music do they want to use, or how could they showcase their own style to it? And so that basically like just let more and more people develop their own style and showcase different styles of play. And, you know, okay, you did this trick, I'm going to try to like progress or one up or do this, you know, something more difficult or do it a different way. And so, yeah, it's very different than like the traditional Japanese style or like the dan ranking style. It was much more creative based.
Do you have a dan? Have you done?
I've never done any of the dan tests myself.
I was just out of curiosity, but because I, you know, for most part, you have to go to Japan, and you've been to Japan so many times, I wasn't sure. But
I think part of it is that like the kids over there have to do it in school, and it feels like something you have to do. So like the creative style doesn't really come out of them as much, or at least it didn't used to when it was first in its origins
in Japan.
And in Japan, but I think seeing that the American culture is doing it, because now you look at Japan and they're way up there with us.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, like a lot of the players getting really creative.
Oh yeah, I mean, and like their history and like how technical everything was. Again, like when we thought, oh, we're inventing a trick, or we just progress this trick, and then we thought that's brand new, and then you see a video of like Shimadera before I ever picked up a kendama doing tricks that are. Oh, okay, now these guys are on a whole different level, or like this has all been done before. And so, again, even with like where technology was, like even though that was existing in Japan, it was hard to, you couldn't just like go on YouTube and search it and like have access to all these different videos.
That's another thing that was pretty much archaic was YouTube, because that was really like the biggest place to go see videos anyways. I mean,
absolutely.
Isn't that the original place they had Colin Sanders' Edit 1 was anyways?
Yeah, and I think without... really without what's happened like in tech and actually just being able to, with all the social platforms, things like YouTube, then being able to like share information so easily, if that didn't exist, I don't think kendama would have had any chance to grow the way it's grown.
Yeah, I mean for sure, because I mean, you have it's still even today it's kind of a niche thing,
Mhm.
so you have to have the social media aspect to move the idea through people. I mean, you can do things like cards and whatever, but a lot of everything as it is today is moved through social media or the
Absolutely,
internet.
yeah.
Everything's
Absolutely.
connected to the internet anyways. But so you have kind of what it is today. It's like this really like almost subculture game.
Mhm.
You can be a really traditional person like Eric Weens. You can be a really creative person like Dave, or you can just do whatever and you're a kendama player. But going through and seeing everything that's happened in kendama, obviously you've been there from Mugen to now. Like, what do you think the future of kendama, as far not necessarily again like the actual kendama itself, but the scene, the creativity, and all that? How do you think that's going to be moving forward? Like, what are your, I guess, predictions?
Yeah. Well, I think all those like little, I don't know if like subculture, I probably use the wrong word. I don't know if it's subcultures, but like just little like tangents or like splinters of kendama.
Yeah.
I think that those will probably all just kind of like grow in their own regards and kind of become more mature. So people who are like very competition based, I think that's only going to get mature. And I think that already a lot of the contests are getting more organized.
To the point
They're
where
getting
it's,
more stable. So much of it's really young and it's developing, but I can
Mhm.
only see that becoming like more structured and more
yeah.
mature. And so I could see the competition side of kendama just becoming its own, not its own thing, but just a more mature branch of kendama. Same thing with like freestyle. If you look at things like catch and flow and freestyle
Right,
contests,
Those
a lot of stuff right now that's so lumped together. I can see those almost becoming
separated.
two whole separate worlds, or a lot of people who just really dedicate so much time and energy into like that one direction.
Mhm.
So I think like what's really cool about kendama is that it is like just this one thing, and then everyone can apply their own like inspiration, like whatever you want to do it. Like if you can play kendama in so many different ways. So like this incredibly technical, high level, like you have a dedication to kendama. It's like part of you're a pro, and it's part of like your everyday world. Everyone going to World Cup to that level, or it can just be this really loose, casual, fun like social game that everyone's together at a barbecue, like jam this random Japanese toy, really casual, and where it's on this like really fun basic level, and then this whole spectrum in between. So for a lot of different people, it means a lot of different things. And I think that's like one of the most appealing things about kendama is there's not really a rule. It's like you don't get this thing and hey, you have to go on this path. It's like use this one tool and then choose your own adventure. And that's like such a satisfying thing to see, like what adventures do people choose and like where does it go and like what do those things evolve into. So I think the competition thing I think will get more and more mature. The level of trick progression can only keep like it's such a mind-blowing, staggering progression of tricks. And even though it's like, okay, how, like, where else can it still go? But in 2 years from now, we'll probably look back and be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Back in 2017, everyone's amateur level, so soft. And so I think that's only going to continue. And I imagine, like, other little, there's probably stuff we haven't even thought of. I'm sure someone's going to pick it up and have their own, some unique style or some unique take on it that might like, inspire one of these whole other like tangents to spin off to. So
I saw this discussion on Downspike the other day about kendama possibly being in the Olympics one day. How do you feel about that becoming a possibility at some point?
Yeah, I mean the Olympics is like
that's a crazy thought.
It's pretty crazy to think about, but I think it's also not very unreasonable for it.
Yeah.
When you look at a lot of things that are in the Olympics now.
Ping pong, skateboarding, I mean, those are things that, they have their own creative roots, kind of like kendama, so
Yeah, and I know with the Olympics, like, there's so many things that have existed in the Olympics that I mean, when I look at it, I'm like, that thing's silly. But there's a whole like subculture behind that.
Yeah, it's like,
people,
this is awesome.
Yeah, and so everyone's got their own thing, and so I mean, so part of me is like, okay, if ribbon spinning or something can be in the Olympics, like Kendama definitely could, but also like you're saying with things like skateboarding, that the Olympics are also kind of realizing, okay, yeah, not a lot of people are really interested in watching all these like really traditional Olympic sports, or some of those are like getting less and less popular. But things like skateboarding,
no, those are blowing up.
Like how is skateboarding not in the Olympic? It's like one of the most fascinating sports on the planet, and so I think as they become like more open minded to some of these other like quote unquote subculture sports, that the kendama could have a place in there. I don't see it as being this huge goal where like
right.
Like I don't think that kendama would need something big like the Olympics. I think it'd be a cool thing to add on, but I think kendama's great as it is. I think it's going to have its own trajectory and path as is, but I know that there has been like some research and some talks, and there's certain steps. There's been some research of like, okay, how do you even get in the Olympics? And in order to do that, there's lots of other things with like associations and groups and like first primary steps that would even have to like happen for that to ever be an end goal. And so I know some of those talks are starting to happen. And
I was gonna say, I think there's a global kendama association
or something like that. The World Kendama Association.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing too.
Yeah, so that's one of the like the long term projects and goals that are involved with that as well. But it's at the same time, it's in a way it's so distant that it's not something that's like on the radar to happen soon, and it's not going to happen, like
one of those things that will lead to the future.
But a potential, probably. If you're looking 10 years, 20 years in the future, that some of those primary steps that we should probably start taking, and it'd be good for like whether or not the Olympics, happen or not. There are certain like parts of starting different organizations that can just help kendama in general, and then if that opens up the path to the Olympics, great. But if not, it can still be something that's really positive.
Yeah, I mean, kendama is, as far as I know, it's been going on throughout the years and just grown to this thing where it has influences from so many different places, and whether it's in the Olympics or not, it's gonna, as far as I know, it's gonna keep growing because that's just what it does. We've all seen it for everywhere from here to Hawaii to Romania. Everywhere to Romania now, and it just keeps growing and growing, and it fluctuates just like anything because it is like we were saying earlier, it's kind of like a more niche sport, which is another question.
Sure.
Do you think kendama is a sport or a toy?
I guess, can you treat it as a sport?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to like it being a tool, and then you can apply it in so many different ways. I mean, sport, it's a label. And the more you try to label things, the more kind of complex it gets, and like what rules are around this label or that label. And so yeah, I mean, it depends how you define a sport, but if it's something that, can you play competitively and things like that, I mean, yeah, you can definitely take kendama, create contests, train for those contests, treat it as a sport, have rankings, things like that. So, so could it be a sport? Sure. Is it only a sport? No. I think, yes, people pick it up and people can just basically have their own approach to it. So,
well, there's a lot to be said still, but do you have anything else going on?
I don't have anything else. That was a very fruitful conversation.
I always like to ask people though, is there anything you would want? We don't have 1 billion followers or anything like that, but is there anything you think that you would want people to know about kendama, or like niche things that you just think that people don't know about and they really should? It's kind of like an offhand question.
Sure. I don't know. I mean, I think one of the main, kind of like seeing the behind the scenes take on it so much. I think one of the most important things that like, or if you could encourage people, or I mean, at the end of the day, like I don't like to tell people what to like. Do whatever you want to do. Do what's best for you. Doesn't involve me at the end of the day, but I would just say like, whenever like if you are going to be a kendama player and you're going to get kendama, just do have some thought about who you're buying from, and I think that supporting the companies who do actually like reinvest into kendama and actually support kendama and things like that. So there's no need for like the laundry list of core brands. Like everyone knows who the core brands are, and the more that people do support that, it allows those companies to actually hold more events and a lot of these things that like we want to do as kendama players, and all the conversations about like what kendama could be, that the more support that players actually have to those companies, that can actually help to make that happen. And so pretty much like whoever when you do support it, it does make a really big difference. And it does. It matters more than I think most people think.
Realize,
I think a lot of people like hear a lot of times like, oh, Kendama USA is this like giant company or big corporation or blah blah blah, and I think a lot of people that might, it's the right word, like
kind of take it for granted.
No, I think it's I think people think it's just like this huge, I don't know, it's like some big thing, and it's really not. It's like small. It's been grassroots. It's like a small handful of us here. People like everyone's been super dedicated to kendama. We have like tons of kendama players that like work here, so it's it's not some like weird skyscraper business in New York.
Like, everyone's sitting in business
bunch of
like,
suits.
okay, people, how can we make money today?
Yeah,
No, it's
I mean,
not.
it's like it's casual, and it's like it's everyone who's here like really does care a lot about kendama, and but yeah, other than that, I don't know. That's about it, I think.
That's awesome. Well, we really appreciate you talking to us, because we're just a couple weird people that want to talk about kendama all day. For everyone listening, thank you for listening to this podcast. If you haven't checked us out before, we have stuff on SoundCloud, and now we're uploading to YouTube. But make sure you check out that SoundCloud stuff for what we've done in the past. We got some interesting things you might want to learn about. Videos with Ryan Plourd, talks with Chad about how to make events. So check that out on SoundCloud at Georgia Kendama Radio. And listen to our other stuff on YouTube. Again, thank you so much for talking to us. And this has been Georgia Kendama Radio. I'm Nick, at Nick German 20.
My name is Corey Sipes, at Sipes Dominant.
And thanks for listening.